the San Diego Charger, Justin Jackson. How are you doing, Justin?
I'm good, man. It's actually LA now, but that does happen a lot. That does happen a lot.
Yeah,
So,
only because actually I was a fan of the San Diego Chargers, so it's kind of still
uh,
hard for me to use the LA, even though I'm from LA. But
yeah.
I was a fan growing up, and we also have a special guest host in the house today, Nick. How you doing, Nick?
Doing good, man. Super excited to join you guys.
Awesome, awesome. So today, what I wanted to do and bring Justin on to talk about was the America, the failed state, just the state of America, and what's happening to its people because of what the American empire is deciding or choosing to do. So, just to set the sort of groundwork. So, 2020, we're dealing with a pandemic. We're dealing with unemployment, people laid off. We're dealing with again, a depression or a harder depression on the horizons. We're having an uptick in mass shootings. We're having an uptick in police shootings of people of color and also indigenous people. With all of what's happening, and not to mention people not being able to make ends meet, homelessness going up, um, the opioid addiction going up, and other substance abuse going up because of people are dealing with a lot of these issues that I'm describing. So what I wanted to do first, Justin, was just kind of like, what is your diagnosis? What is your critique? What is your assessment of the American state or the failed state of America?
I mean, yeah. I mean, you hit the nail right on the head right there, right? We put people in a situation where they're living on the margins for, I mean, decade after decade. We're shipping jobs overseas. Everything is getting more expensive. Wages are staying stagnant. Essentially because everything is getting more expensive, wages are decreasing, especially when you talk about 40-50% of all wage earners being minimum wage workers. And so you're just seeing, I mean, a society on the brink, and I think ever since 2008, 2009, it's kind of been a house of cards, especially in the economic and financial system. And then, COVID came around and it kind of just, I think, really accelerated the decline of America. We still spend almost probably more than $1 trillion every single year trying to go around the world and enforce American hegemony, especially when it comes to economics. So, we're overextending militarily, which is the way that all nations fail, all empires fail. And we're not learning from history at all. In any sense of the word, we're not offering people free healthcare. Instead, they're just going to take your money and give more of that to health insurance, the health insurance industry, and then code it as some type of big thing that they're subsidizing your Cobra just through September. They're going to give you a child credit, not to mention the people that don't have kids, right? But that they're going to act like that's some type of UBI. So they're just doing all these incremental things that people are not really feeling. It's not lifting half of people out of poverty. It's not doing any of that shit. That's just something they're going to go out to the media. The media is not critical of the Democrats, so they'll go out and they'll repeat that. They're stenographers to power. So yeah, we're just not in a good situation right now. And if you told me, if you kind of zoom out 10,000 feet and you told me, well, Joe Biden is going to be the one in charge during this crisis, do you think that America is going to go up from here or go down? Well, I think we all know the answer to that, because Joe Biden has been in that system, in that entrenched system that has gotten us to this point. So of course he's not the right person to lead. And just because he's, doing more deficit spending than Obama did, okay, well, the atmosphere, lends him to be able to do that. It's not like he's doing something crazy out of the ordinary. He's still governing as a centrist, which, because of the Overton window that we have in this country is pretty much a true conservative Republican. So I don't know. We're going to have to start looking outside of electoral politics, I think, and actually kind of working within our communities, because there's not a whole lot of help on the horizon coming from the federal government, for sure, and state governments you see around the country. They're focusing on banning trans kids from sports and all that shit, and making sure people can't vote instead of actually doing the things that would help improve people's lives. So that's kind of where I see the state of America is right now. Is it's not in a good place, but with all the grandeur and and the smoke and mirrors, we still try and act like we're some world superpower, even though we're the richest country in the world, but everyone here is broke. So I mean, that's just the
Yeah.
reality of the situation.
Yeah, that is an accurate description or an accurate assessment. I would agree. What's always curious to me when a nation is going through times like this is how are the people at the lowest end of the totem pole economically doing? Because when everything is good, they're still doing bad. So when everything is bad, how much worse
Right.
can they be? You know what I mean? Like how much worse can they
Right.
what can they be going through? So yesterday I decided for my another show I was doing to just kind of walk the streets of LA and I didn't even plan this. I just saw homelessness encampments just along the street, and it was just an elderly black lady. Like it made me emotional to see this elderly black lady living on the streets, like living on the streets. She had to be in her 60s, living on the streets, and it was heartbreaking to see that. So no, go ahead. So Nick, what were you gonna say?
I just want to add, because I think a lot of people are kind of delusional about the state of our society because they got a lot of great toys. I mean, we got Netflix, we got PlayStations, so people are misunderstanding the situation that we're in. One stat, I mean, I share it on my show all the time, but it blows the liberal consciousness away, is when I explain how Black Americans financially are worse right now than they was at the height of civil rights era. And then, not even that, you had UN inspectors, something else that liberals don't like to talk about. You had UN inspectors going to the South in Alabama, and then they came to a conclusion that people are literally living in third world level poverty in these areas. Meanwhile, you had Jeff Bezos, you had Elon Musk. I think Elon Musk made around like $171 billion throughout the course of the pandemic. So I just want to let everyone know that this is not by accident. This is working exactly how they want it to work, because you got more Black millionaires, you got more wealthy, you got the increase of income inequality. So there is a transfer of funds and there is increased quality of life. It's just only a small percentage of the society is benefiting off of that, and that's by design. So when you see people homeless when you're in Kansas City, when you're in California walking around, that's based on that UN report. That when you look at the average worker and how they're doing right now, there's no improvement. In fact, there's actually a regression in society, and that's the point I want to let people know. I mean, there talks about they might have shooting squads in South Carolina. I mean, we're regressing as a society, but people got toys, so they're like, oh, we can watch Netflix, we can stream. So people think things are okay, but they're not okay. That's why I don't have kids, because I don't want to starve family. But meanwhile, my older generation, they can. My dad is 1 hour 12, because you could do that back in the day. Now the idea you do that now is unbelievable. So that's the regression of society. But sorry to cut you off, CJ. I'll pass it right back to you.
No, I'm glad you did. And Justin, did you kind of want to touch upon? I saw that you kind of wanted to say something a few minutes ago. Did you kind of want to touch upon that same topic, or did you have something to say about that?
I mean, yeah, exactly what you just said, Nick. It's the fact that you can live in a society where there's people. There's an elderly Black lady who's probably recently homeless. I mean, along with a lot of other people that are recently homeless that were living on the margins. COVID hit. They lost all their savings if they had any. They lost their job. There's no recourse for those people. So it's not a surprise that there's an increase in homelessness, right? We're not actually taking care of our people. And then you look around and you live in a society where Jeff Bezos can buy $150 million house, the most expensive house ever built, ever purchased. And you have people in that same exact city living under bridges, without any aid, without any help. Oh, and by the way, that's not even 1%. That's not even 0.5% of Jeff Bezos' net worth. What do you like? If you just tell a person that isn't inundated in our society and doesn't take everything just as is, like, oh, nothing can change, and you tell them, well, you have a society where there's over 600 billionaires. That means people with more money than they could ever spend, not to mention the people that have 950 million or 850 million. And then you have 50% of workers, 60% of workers living paycheck to paycheck. What do you expect out of that society? what do you expect? That society's going to fail. You can only squeeze, and this is the root problem with capitalism. You can only squeeze so much money if you have a continual growth model, right? So when all these billionaires are gaining and accruing this much wealth, who are they taking that from? That's why you should never look at a billionaire and look up to that person. No, they're taking money from you, the working person, right? They're still doing it from the working people, and now guess who they're going to? They're going to the middle class people, and they're taking away their wealth. That's why the middle class is disappearing. They're going to continue to do this until the entire nation collapses, and at that point they'll just take all their money and go somewhere else. Like, they don't care. They don't have any ties. They don't have any, actual pride in this country or anything like that. They just want money. They want more and more money, and they're going to keep taking it from you. And then once the society completely collapses, no one who doesn't have money or any resources like that or assets is going to have any recourse, but they're going to be able to just take their 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 yachts, I don't know, sail around the world and live the rest of their life that way.
That's such a good point. That's why rich people don't care about climate change. Because at the end of the day, when they know when Florida goes underwater, there's no borders for rich people. I want people to understand, like, if you're rich, you can go wherever you want, because the only cost of travel is money. So if climate change pops off, they have their bunkers, they have their protection. And I'll pass it right back to CJ at this last point, because we talk about homelessness in California, and this is what we represent at the Hampton Leftists, because I unapologetically advocate for my community. So when we talk about homelessness, I want people to put this in context. We are 13% of the population, Black Americans are, and we are 40% of the homeless population. And people are wondering why I'm upset. And how easy would it be for Black capitalists like Jay-Z, for example, LeBron, all these people to pull the resource together and buy hotels in our community? They can do that super easily. So that's why I love your point where you said we shouldn't be looking up to billionaires. They're not even just billionaires. I guess I'm a little bit more cynical. I don't like Black capitalism as a whole. I mean, these people are leading us off a cliff. They land our community. I mean, they're 40% Black homelessness, and Oprah Winfrey can sleep at night for some reason. It doesn't make any sense to me. But I'll pass it back to CJ.
Yeah, just real quick off that. Sorry if I could just add. Last year, I went to the mission. I think it's a midnight mission right on Skid Row. Yeah. That's before I had ever, really understood the LA dynamics. Obviously, we're the LA Chargers, but we practice in Orange County. So that's where I live. And so when I went, to the mission, that was the first time I was ever really on Skid Row. And it was just an unbelievable thing to see, people having to live like this in this city that I thought, being from Chicago and seeing movies and thinking of LA and Hollywood, like, to see the real reality on the ground, it was just stunning for me. And then I wanted to learn more about what was going on. And so I talked to, the people at the mission, the people that worked there, the staff. And I think there was the main fundraiser for the mission. And she was saying that about 90% of the people they see are Black. 90% of the people they see at the mission are Black. And if you don't know, the mission is the homeless shelter the Midnight Mission is the homeless shelter right on Skid Row. And then I also wanted to understand the dynamics of the people and the lives that those people that they see are living. And they said only 30% of the people that they see have some type of drug issue. The rest of the people are working people, maybe just living out of their cars because they can't afford it, or they had a bad break and they can't afford housing anymore, or something like that. And so it's funny how everyone always sees homeless people and they're like, oh, they must just be crack addicts or drugged out on some shit. Right. But that's not the reality. It's not borne out statistics. That's not the reality at all. If you're living on the margin and something happens in your life, someone gets sick. I mean, there's a million things that can happen in this country that you're not protected from. You can be on the street like that fast. So I really want people to understand that these are your neighbors, right? These people probably at one point were housed and now they're not because some situation happened in their life and they don't have any recourse. They don't have any family. The government's not helping them. They're just people, right? And they're not these, like, it's so dehumanizing the way people look at homeless people, and it's really sickening. And being thrust into that situation kind of really opened my eyes and kind of beat down or eliminated even my preconceptions, about homeless people and the homeless population, especially here in LA.
Yeah, and to your point, I can attest to the same thing. It truly is a misconception about homeless people. Another thing about homeless people is that they're completely broke. Like, they just don't have enough money for a home. That doesn't necessarily mean they're not, or even that they have a job. But think about this. What does it say about a society, any society, that an adult person or person can work a full-time job and can't afford housing? Like, what does that say about a society? And what does it say that a society knows that and does nothing about it? I'll start with Justin.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's, I think someone I saw in the chat, it's almost like it feels like a soulless society, right? Because you have people that can just continue on with their lives and they just, it's like out of sight, out of mind. I don't see it. It's not in my community. So, it is what it is. And that's the most frustrating thing about America, right? It on itself, it's like almost this false dichotomy, because you have these people that are like, America, we're so great, we're so amazing, we can do anything, like we're number one, all this type of stuff. But then it's like, oh, well, there's homelessness, but I guess there's nothing we could do about it. It's just is what it is. It's like the same thing where people are like, I mean, it's just everything about America kind of seems hypocritical when you really kind of get down into the details. And then we project all of our ills and all the fucked up things about our society on the other societies, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think it just shows that we are a completely propagandized nation full of people who, on the one hand, you kind of feel for, because the majority of the population is working so hard, 2 and 3 jobs. Like, you got kids, you got stress every single day. Is someone going to get sick? Am I going to lose my job? And am I going to be another one of those unhoused people? Right. But then it's like, we've been so beat down. We've been so, kind of put into this mindset of, oh, well, I guess there's just nothing we could do about it. Let's just, I guess, keep going, put our head down and keep marching along. And that's just so kind of, I don't know, debilitating, at least to me, to see that we could come together, we could push for these things, but we just, every single time, we just accept crumbs and we act like it's some huge victory or some huge win. And I guess that's how you get to the place where we are today.
Absolutely.
And this conversation is exactly why I'm actually a staunch anti-imperialist. This conversation we're having right now, because how dare America have the audacity to criticize other countries? Because we were talking about housing, by the way. What's the country that we love to demonize the most? North Korea, right? Mm-hmm. Do you guys know North Korea provides free housing to their citizens?
Not surprised.
I don't apologize for states. I don't like governments and states. But I hate when America try to pretend that we're this great country when the only thing we're better than any other country at is jailing our citizens and bombing countries overseas. So we always talk shit about Cuba, but Cuba got higher literacy rates than we do. And if you want to look at countries like North Korea, Russia, China, and be like, oh, they propagandize, they got all these issues. I'm like, well, they may have their issues, but at least they're providing their people with healthcare. Know what I mean? So It's like and I don't buy that talking point, because it creates the illusion that we have to do something about it. Like, okay, we're America, we're showing everyone this is how we're supposed to live, so we got to overthrow North Korea. But, bro, they provide housing. Well, I just said there's a homelessness crisis, not in general, but especially among the Black community. So I don't understand how anyone can be Black and be imperialist and then you can wag your finger at other countries. And I talked about this on my show earlier. I don't know if you saw the report, Justin, but they just did a report out of ICC where they was looking into police violence in Black Americas. And they had experts from multiple countries in Asia, Europe, Africa, with doctorate degrees, human rights experts. And they concluded that American police is violating international law with the way they treat Black Americans. And it's the level of a human rights tragedy. That's what they laid in their commission, 8-week hearing. Now, Justin, imagine if that report was written about another country.
Right, Russia or China or like Venezuela. No, it's funny. Like if you think about Venezuela actually, I think in the 2008 crisis was providing like energy to like some Black, I mean, they had like this program where they were like providing stuff to Americans, like poor Americans who couldn't afford shit. Venezuela was doing that, and now we're pointing to Venezuela like, oh, they they have corruption and they have this and they have that. That's why they have their country is struggling, not because of the sanctions we impose on them, which are murderous in and of themselves. But we hear people hear sanction. People don't even know where Venezuela is, first off. Second off, they hear a sanction, they don't even know what that means. But imagine if you couldn't, like, right when COVID started, you go to the store and instead of it being toilet paper that people are freaking out they can't get, even though they could just hop in the shower and wash their ass. It's medicine, right? It's any of these other things, which I guess we do have in this country, because if you can't afford it, then you can't get it anyway.
It's like America is the only country that its government claims to be the richest and the poorest at the same time. Like, we're the richest country, we can afford, American exceptionalism, but we're too poor to afford, all the things that Americans want, like a living wage, like a single payer of health care. It's like we're the richest and the poorest country at the same time. And that is a good segue for the next question I had about America, the failed state. So we kind of have diagnosed what is wrong, or we've talked about the symptoms, and kind of, more broadly talked about why we're here and how people are living with it. We talked about homeless population and how people are living with it. If the American public is conditioned to live this way, why would a corrupt government ever change it? Like, if you're conditioned to take crumbs and and the crumbs now to you is a 7-course meal, you get what I'm saying? Like, a $1,400 check is crumbs. But if you've been starved for 12 months of the pandemic, it looks like a T-bone steak to you. Right. So, yeah, you know what I mean? Like,
it's standards. Yeah, it's standards. Yeah, it's so I talk about that on my show a lot.
Yeah, it's so crazy how the American public don't see that, or maybe they do, and it's just the case of, we know our government is corrupt, we know everything is terrible, but I have kids to feed, so I can't really even concentrate on that. Like what is preventing the people, we the people, from calling out all these things and demanding change? I'll start with you, Justin.
Yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? And I think this is why, I've been so fervent recently, because I think COVID kind of illuminated, right, for everyone can see it now, the true, ills of our society, right? No, there was no football, there was no sports, there was no concerts, there was none of these distractions, like the toys you were talking about, Nick. None of that was around for people, to distract themselves with. And so people kind of had to come to terms with what America is, right? People that normally aren't really paying attention. And so I think kind of during this time is I think it could be a quintessential moment for us to really start pushing people and getting them to fall out of that almost trance, this trance of American exceptionalism, and this trance of, everything will just be fine. I guess we just have to keep working harder, and then, it'll turn my way eventually, right? I think we can use this as a moment to really push it on the people, whether it's a general strike that we're pushing for, or, we're trying to unionize places like Amazon or Walmart, or just anything, but it has to start on the ground level, state single payer. Like, we just cannot rely, especially on the federal government. We have to start, making more changes at the local level, because that really is where people can have an effect, and where, something, pretty tangible can happen and change in your life. I think we have to focus more on there, because at the national level, it's just completely corrupted. Now, don't get me wrong, especially in California, it's pretty damn corrupted too at the state level. So that's also a tall order. But, I just think this is a moment in time where we have to use it. We have to use it to kind of bring people together before, America itself kind of gets back up and running with all the distraction that I was talking about before. But I'm just trying to talk, use this platform that I have, and I know y'all are doing that too, to talk with people, to try and to get to understand, like, how can we break through, the American public? Because I think people are at the point where people are like, okay, come on, like, our government, like, it's not working for us. Like, it's so horribly corrupted. Like, people understood that Joe Biden sucked. People just hated Donald Trump more, right? Like, I think it's past the 90s where people think like, oh, unless you're talking about Twitter liberals or hardcore conservatives, right? Where people think that, the government is actually working for you and is actually going to do something to tangibly change your lives. I think it has to start at a more local level, because like I said, it's just so corrupted, so corrupted at the national level. I think it's going to be hard to get anything done. And I mean, 2022, like, I don't think the Democrats are going to be in power anymore. And then you're going to have nothing done for 2 years. And then you'll probably get like, I don't know, Tom Cotton in 2024, who just said we're under incarcerated. So,
people don't like to hear my take on this, but ever since the election, I've been pretty vocal that if you look at national politics, Black people are really screwed.
Yeah.
Black people are really screwed because we are the only group that are expected to just vote for the Democratic Party with no question asked. What I mean by that, so if they expect Latinos not to vote for someone if they don't have a solid immigration plan, if you don't speak about violence against Asian Americans, then you're not going to expect them to vote for you. If you're not strong on women's issues, if you're not strong on LGBTQ issues, you're not expected to get their vote. This is why I would never apologize. There was a ton of libs that upset with me because I was a vocal advocate for never supporting Joe Biden. I would never, ever apologize for that because I strongly believe, and I wrote about this in great detail, that the fact that Black people decided to vote for the Democratic Party without asking for anything for the last few decades, that is exactly why we are in the position that we are right now. So that's the situation. They already know we're not going to they don't have to give us anything for elections. So what can we do to answer CJ's question? And I'm in a red state. I'm in Missouri right now. And despite that we're in a deeply red conservative state, we passed medical marijuana. We increased the minimum wage. How we do that? Direct ballot initiatives. How did they get ranked choice voting in a few states? Direct ballot initiatives. So I believe the only value electoral politics have right now, especially since I talk about how disappointing Bernie Sanders and the squad has been. We can't rely on them. We got to do it ourselves. We got to get left wing groups wherever you got to look at your local issues because that's important. So, for example, we also expanded Medicaid, by the way, in Missouri. So if you want to actually get stuff done, you got ballot initiatives, and then also we got to live as socialists. Like we got to reject the capitalist way of life where we take care of our neighbors. Not everyone can do mutual aid. Not everyone have money. But just live as a anti-capitalist. Reject their way of living, and make sure people in your life just live a better experience. That's the only thing I can really tell people because I can't BS people because it's easy to be like, well, if we just do this, we just vote for Bernie Sanders and squad, and we keep supporting just as Democrats. Things are going. It's easy to do that. It's hard to explain properly that we're screwed. I'm sorry, as Black people, unless we in this capitalist mindset, unless we honestly get off the Democratic plantation. People get mad when I use that talking point, but sorry, it's accurate. It's accurate. Unless we do that and actually engage in mutual aid and actually engage in like real local politics that can make a difference where we don't have to rely on politicians like direct ballot initiatives, that's the only way we can get things changed. And also CJ and at Fred Hampton Leftists, we are very, very strong advocates of general strikes. And I don't care how hard it is. Like because things right now is dire.
Right. It's necessary.
And to me, a general strike is literally the answer to everything. Just tell me what the issue is with the government, money in politics, general strike. A living wage, general strike. Single payer health care, general strike. Ending qualified immunity, general strike. General strike holds these corporations nuts in a vice. You understand? And they're going to be willing to do anything. And when I say these corporations, when I say corporations, I'm including the politicians because they're just an extension of they're just an extension of the corporation. So to me, nothing is going to change. They'll do a lot of this, incrementalism around the edges, and mainstream media will blow it up like it's the next FDR, and it's our jobs. Like the press in the United States has been derelict in their duty for decades. So it is every citizen's job, Justin, Nick, Jay, to say, hey, I'm a citizen journalist. I'm bringing to you this discussion, bringing to you the truth, bringing to you the propaganda-free information. And I think that is our way of contributing to either speeding up this failed state so it completely fails and we can start anew, or actually bringing substantive change to the United States I'll start with Nick this time. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was about to say, because I had a little bit of hope last year, and now it's been killed again. You know why I had hope? When the whole George Floyd protest started, and that was the longest sustained protest since the civil rights movement. And I remember at the time I was begging people at the time. I mean, I don't got any influence, so I wasn't about to make a big difference, but I was begging people that if Joe Biden defeats Donald Trump, we should stay in the streets the same way that we was in the streets under Donald Trump. So what killed my enthusiasm? Because I'm like, all right, we can maintain this in the Biden administration over everything. Stay in the street, just like you said, CJ. I love that example you gave. Over anything, be in the street just like George Floyd. Protesting should be the way of life in America right now because of the quality of life. But the fact that Biden managed to literally kill that momentum and put people to sleep and bring them to brunch, we predicted this. Like on my show, on Fred Had the Leftists, we knew there was when I talked to Jackie, we knew this was going to happen. But the level in which it happened is really, really damn depressing. Because we should have never left the streets. And then you had leaders of the Black Lives Matter that was like, when Biden won, we won. I'm like, dude, we are so screwed. Because people just think, so the Democratic Party get in charge, they left the streets. They left the streets. And then people wonder why I didn't vote for Biden. Because my mindset was, I'm like, all right, even if Trump win, we are a strong people. Like the idea that Donald Trump is the worst thing to happen to black people is insane. Like, we've been through way worse than that. So if Donald Trump beat Joe Biden, we just stay our ass in the streets and shut shit down if things get really bad. But the privileged liberal class hated me for saying that, because if you make $100,000 a year, $150,000 a year, and you're comfortable, the last thing you want is society to break down. Mm-hmm. So they'd rather just Joe Biden get in charge, and we can have a quiet, failed state. Because that's what they're happy about that. Because once again, this report come out regarding how there's massive human rights violation that the police is complicit with our community. I mean, I talk about how 40% of homeless people are black. If you're a white liberal and you're comfortable, that doesn't affect you. What affects you is the Trump derangement syndrome you see all day on TV. So that's where I came from, and that's why I didn't care. I was clear that I didn't care who won. I wasn't rooting for one way or another. But to me, my mindset was nothing changes. Whether Biden wins or Trump wins, we are in the same situation. The same that situation. We should respond in kind.
Yeah, I mean, during the force the vote situation, I was saying, well, if Donald Trump can get, all these people to come to the Capitol to, I don't know, protest freedom and election, I don't know, whatever. Why we can't get AOC or one of the squad members to use their platform to tweet out, hey, we're meeting up at the Capitol for Medicare for all. And then what I got told? I got told, oh, we're in a pandemic, so we can't do that. I'm like, we was just protesting all summer for BLM in the middle of a pandemic. But see, people will always use, excuses if it's convenient to their narrative, right? Mm-hmm. If it's convenient to, we don't want anyone talking bad or criticizing the squad, well, all of a sudden, we can't go out and protest because there's a pandemic, So that is another huge issue that I see as well, Nick. It's that these white liberals get so comfortable, and then they completely own the media, right? And then they're basically, teaching or informing the general public that everything's fine, right? It's literally that meme where the person's in the room, everything's on fire, and they're saying this is fine. But what they don't understand is someone like Biden, like I was saying earlier, leads to someone like Tom Cotton, right? It almost accelerates the decline. Yeah. And I just think that, like you were saying, Nick, at a local level is where we're going to have to change shit. And it's the fact that even in Missouri, you can have a direct ballot initiative and you can get you said medical marijuana. Was it marijuana or medical marijuana?
Yeah, medical marijuana. We had a Medicaid expansion and we increased the minimum wage. So the idea that people are not progressive, the idea that the center is neoliberal, that's a joke. It always been a joke. But go ahead, Justin.
No, and exactly, like that's how you break through that propaganda, right? When Bernie goes on Fox News and he says, the health insurance companies are screwing you, pharma's screwing you, I have this plan, Medicare for all, and the whole audience claps, like they've of course watched Fox, they've been brainwashed, but it directly affects their lives.
Yeah.
So it like if I'm telling you, well, you're making $8 and we're gonna pass this direct ballot initiative that's $15 an hour or $20 or whatever, they're not going to be like, well, Tucker Carlson told me that you know, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to be like, wait, what? Of course I want my wage to be doubled, right? So that's how you actually break through that mold. And so I really like what you said, and I'm going to start pushing that more because I think that is really smart. But and once you have that direct ballot initiative, you have to make sure that you're out in your community talking about it too. And that's such a big thing because like in California, we had Prop 22, right? You're going to have these corporations come in and spend $200 million because that's the cost of business for them. They don't want to pay their drivers as real workers. They want to keep paying them poverty wages. So it's the first step of actually getting the community to say, okay, let's do this direct ballot initiative. But then it's informing the community past the propaganda, past the corporate the corporate advertising that's going to be for us, past the corporate media them on their airwaves every single night telling you Medicare for all and that all that shit's bad. Like we have to also do that work to inform our community. So when these direct ballot initiatives come up, these propositions, et cetera, like in Missouri, that people understand the real dynamics of it and how it's truly going to change their life, and they don't fall into that corporate propaganda like we did here in California with Prop 22, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I'm also in California, and I just remember a lot of the ads for the Prop 22. I was like watching them, and I'm like, it was completely the opposite of what they were seeing in the commercial, and I was just like, it is just disgusting. But it kind of is a good segue. What I want to talk about next, which is propaganda, and I agree with Malcolm X, and I forget his quote, but propaganda to me is the most strongest thing and is the thing that's keeping the ruling class in place, that's keeping the oligarch in place and keeping people misinformed, where people are voting against their own interests. Like the person you're voting for. So for example, if Black people want anything to be done to the police state, you don't elect the person who wrote the 1994 crime bill. That's
California Stop Cop.
You understand the level of brainwashing that has to come about in order for a person to do that. And that's the reason why I say propaganda is the thing that's keeping America in this place. And it's also the reason they're coming after the left. They're telling on themselves. It's coming after the left because they know information is the value, or correct information, I should say. Correct information is the value. So what are your guys' assessment of American propaganda and how it plays into keeping everybody where they are? And how do we get out of that? I'll start with you, Justin.
Yeah, no, everything you said is 100% on point, and it's even gotten to the to the level where they're we think about something like Twitter or YouTube, like now they're starting to cordon people off, right? They're saying, okay, there's this algorithm we have together where you're just going to see people that are in your that have your same thought process, right? It essentially is an echo chamber. But now, because these corporations that are Twitter, Facebook, they don't want to get regulated, they're going to just do whatever the ruling class tells them to do, and whatever the politicians tell them to do, like you said, extension of the corporation. And so I think the remedy for that, I think, is we have to start actually having conversations with people we don't agree with. We have to actually start and stop being afraid to get in some type of uncomfortable, like confrontational type of conversation. I think there's a lot there's this idea where anyone that doesn't agree with you or has a slightly different opinion on something is this deplorable or too far gone, and you can't have a conversation with them. And it's starting to happen on Twitter, even within the left. It's like guilt by association. Oh, you nominally agree with this one person on one thing. Oh, all of a sudden you agree with them on everything. You're associated with them, so I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not, that, like, I'm sure y'all have seen that on the left, and it's sad that it's actually infecting the left as well now. So I think the biggest thing for me is, like, I'll talk to whoever. Like, I don't care. I want to have a conversation with you because I've had conversations with people who I was close with from college or whatever, and they thought Bernie was some crazy radical. 5 months later, I had a conversation with them, just talking with them as people. 5 months later, they're coming back. Now they're like, well, shit, Bernie's not even radical enough for me. Like, that's the type of shit you have to do on the grassroots level, to make sure, we kind of are seeing past this propaganda, like you were talking about, and seeing that we're not nearly as different as they want to make it seem. In fact, we're a lot more similar to each other. They're the ones that are different. They're the ones that have all this money that they're trying to, they're going to use now to buy off politicians to ensure that you and your family can't get ahead, that you and your family will always be living on the margins and poverty, right? So I think we have to break through. We have to break through that. And that's why I'm really, excited to be on this program with y'all. I'm definitely going to have y'all on my program to talk more about it. But, I think we just have to make sure we're, boosting each other up and spreading this message as far and wide as we can, because what else do we have? Like, we used to have social media, but now you can't even get one of your videos to go viral because they've had, all these algorithms put into place where they're going to just make sure that just your subscribers see it, and no one on the homepage who's just looking around, maybe just get into politics, see it. Maybe I never would have got into lefty politics if it was how it is right now, when I was first looking for a medium to kind of grow my political mind. So I think it's really important that we just continue to have these conversations and not be afraid to talk to people. Like when did that become a thing? I hate that.
Justin, I got into a lot of trouble. Well, no, let me rephrase this. I had a lot of CIA leftists get mad at me. When I say that, I'm not saying they're part of the CIA. I'm saying they are engaging in strategy the CIA would love to see.
Yeah.
So I'm not including in one piece in the CIA, but they don't need to recruit you in the CIA because you're doing the work for them. So these are the people who got mad at me because I said I am willing to accept help from anyone on my terms. And people are like, oh, so you want to work with right-wing supremacists? You want to work with racists? And I'm like, hey, white lib, I'm not sure you're not racist, by the way. Like, why are you assuming that I think you're not racist? You got a lot to prove to me.
Right.
To show. So I'm already working with you because I'm like, all right, you agree with me on some issues, but I'm not sure what you really think. I'm not sure if you're really Amy Cooper that was like call the cops on us. And you know what I noticed, Justin? I noticed that the people who get mad at us for claiming that we want to talk to right wingers or anyone who's open to help us accomplish our goals, I look at their location on Twitter. Never fails. New York, California. You know where I live? I live in Missouri, and I sold cars in Kansas. I mean, deep red Kansas. So these progressives, or you want to call them live, either way to me. They live in New York. They live in California. They live in their box. So they view anyone having conversation outside that box to be too far gone. But they don't understand that when me who live in a red state, we have no choice but to talk to these people. We just talk about ballot initiatives, right? Mm-hmm. So people are like, oh, you will work with the Boogaloo Boys? Will you work with all these far-right racists? What do you mean by that? So let me propose a scenario I always propose to them. We talk about ballot initiatives, right? Imagine if you had, and we're going to use really easy numbers here. You need 1,000 signatures in order to expand Medicaid, which will help my grandma significantly. You have 980 signatures. But then there's 20 racists or Boogaloo Boys who are like, yeah, I should need Medicare expansion too. Do you deny those signatures and not get Medicaid expansion? So when people get mad when we propose to work with these people, they are deeply unserious. Because this is the reality of political activism. You need to get those signatures in your red state, but these people that live in blue states, they're so out of touch, they'd rather just shut those people out because they think they can win otherwise. Meanwhile, people like me who live in Missouri, we got no choice. So I'm like, if you get mad at me, fuck off. I don't care because you guys are being ridiculous. And one last thing, I'll toss right back to you, CJ, because this goes back to propaganda and this goes back to talking to people. Because if you listen to media, you would not know this fact. And I'll tweet about this as well. You guys know that Joe Biden is to the right of 56% of Republicans on healthcare? 56% of Republicans support the public option. And then it gets even worse. Even worse. 1 out of 4 Republicans support Medicare for all. So 1 out of 4 Republicans outflank Joe Biden and the Democratic Party on the issue of healthcare. Mm-hmm. But you guys tell me that I should support the Democratic Party and vote for them, but not talk to the right wingers who want universal healthcare? That doesn't track for me. I talked to you, CJ.
Well, let me just say this. They expose themselves too, because these are the same people that would always praise Bernie. Oh, he works with someone who's super far right wing, like Mike Lee or Rand Paul, right? On certain issues, he would work with those people if we have the same interests, right? And it's on my terms. I'll work with you if it's on my terms. So you're telling me if there's a Boogaloo Boy that's out there at a BLM protest actually protecting the protesters from the cops, which is why we're protesting in the first place, you're going to be like, actually, no, y'all can stay over there. We don't want y'all a part of this coalition, right? Or if there's someone who you disagree with on 90% of the issues, but they want to end wars, you're going to be like, actually, no, let's keep the troops in Afghanistan because I don't like you personally and I don't like, some things that you believe. So I'm just not going to work with you. How has anything ever changed that way? It's
the
ridiculous.
CIA loves what they do. The CIA loves their strategy. Sorry, go ahead, Justin.
No, it helped. Like, they don't understand that they're helping the establishment. They're helping the status quo. They're helping things stay exactly as you are, exactly as it is. And it sucks because the people are actually progressive. The people are actually at a point where they've broken through the propaganda. And people can see that, there would be a Fox News poll and 70% of the people, even though they loaded the question and said government-run healthcare, they'll still say they want it because they're being screwed right now. It's gotten to such a level where people are being fucked so bad by the system that they're even if they're still ingesting that bullshit media that is ensuring, and further entrenching the fucking that's happening to them on certain policies, they'll still say, okay, I don't care who's supporting this policy, I want this policy to pass, so I'm going to support it. And we're leaving those people. We're just saying, no, fuck that. We're going to put them to the margins. We don't want to talk to them. We don't want to be around them. We don't want them a part of our coalition. Well, good luck. Good luck getting anything done that way. Good fucking luck. It don't matter
because they're comfortable. They don't have to get anything done.
Part of the status quo. That's because they're not part of the formula of keeping the status quo. That's why they really could care less. But when people say, I won't work with that person or that person, this is my response all the time. Black people, ever since landing on this continent, have had to work with people that absolutely hate our guts. So if Black people took that same stance, we're not going to work with anybody who's racist, who would Black people work with?
A lot of people forget. I'll chime in real quick.
It doesn't make any sense. Black people don't have the privilege to say, we don't want to work with this person or that person or this person who doesn't like me. We don't have that privilege. And that is my response to anyone. And just the ridiculousness that both of you have pointed out, that, hey, you're telling me that if a right-winger hands you a lottery ticket that's worth $10 million, you're not going to take it? Like, it doesn't make sense that you're just saying you're cutting off everything because this person disagreed with you on some things. That way of thinking, that we have been conditioned to be like, to be in our tribal corner. If we figure out that our tribal corners are actually the people, white working class, urban, once they figure out they're actually on the same team, that's when the duopoly is going to see its demise. And that's why they work so hard to infuse narratives to keep those people in their tribal corners.
Do you think Amazon gives a fuck if one of their workers is a right winger, a left winger, apolitical?
No,
they don't care. We're just gonna extract the wealth from them. Right. So why is it that we, us grassroots, we have to care so much about what other American citizens believe and feel and who they support? But these corporations, they can just extract wealth from everybody. They could just screw over everybody. They don't. It's not on partisan lines for them. Right. So there's always, two sets of rules, right? There's two sets of rules. And, it's just unbelievable that people, even in this day and age with America in a failed state, further hurtling more and more towards a failed state. We're not going to be the world reserve currency probably in the next 10 years. We're getting passed over by China, a lot of these other, countries in economics. Like, I don't think people truly understand what it's like when you're not the global superpower and forcing your will on everyone else, and you can just buy cheap shit, like because people want American dollars.
Have never been in that place. We've never been in that place. But Nick, did you have something to look like you were going to say something, sir?
I don't. If you don't mind, I want to just slightly shift the topic of the conversation because
absolutely.
Yeah, Justin, he brought up force to vote, and I remember when the force to vote conversation first started. I actually had a slightly different take because my take was we shouldn't vote for Nancy Pelosi, period.
Right.
like that's where I started at. And then I heard the force the vote strategy. I'm like, well, if you're gonna vote for it, at least get something out of it.
Mhm.
So the idea that people who was against that, like, so you're just a pure voting for Nancy Pelosi advocate? Like they're very like the people who still argue about it. They very passionate about the concept of voting for Nancy Pelosi. But the reason I bring this up because I follow your work and your content. And you refer yourself as a healthcare advocate. I wrote in great detail my second piece I have on my Substack, Progressive Martial Artist Substack. Check it out. How Medicare for All is actually the most pro-Black policy platform. And when I canvassed for Bernie Sanders, I framed it that way. And the first reaction people would think like, oh, what about reparations? Reparations has to be, yeah, I am very strongly for reparations. But you can get capitalists to support reparations. You know why? Tom Steyer support reparations. You know why? Because the capitalists know they're going to get that money back.
It's just going to go right back.
Yeah.
It's going to flow right back into their pocket.
Yep. And Black Americans, despite us being 13% of the population, despite us having 1 out of 10 of the wealth, I actually think it's worse now, especially COVID, the wealth of white Americans, we hold 35% of the medical debt in this country. So this is
crazy, bro.
The state, like we only 13% of the population and we have less funds, but we still have 35% of the medical debt. So that's why they want reparations, because even when we get reparations, guess what? We that money going right back to the medical debt.
Right.
So
no. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, you good. I was just wanting to ask you, like, what's your experience and what led you to be such a staunch Medicare for All for advocates? I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I've told this story, quite a few times, but when I was 3 or 4 years old, my mom passed away from breast cancer, and obviously at the time, like, I'm 3 or 4, I don't really know that much is going on. Obviously, it's really traumatic time for my family and whatnot. But once I started getting into left wing politics, I started to wonder, like, man, my family went through a serious, healthcare situation, and I wanted to kind of gauge, how, what our financial situation was like at that time. I had 2 parents, middle class parents. My dad, kind of first generation, really getting out of poverty. He was an engineer. My mom was an accountant. Her parents grew up in the city, so once again, like first generation, actually kind of getting out of poverty, kind of into the middle class. And what I found out was that my mom was worried about getting further treatment for cancer, and it was a pretty aggressive form, so it wasn't that long of a fight, but she was worried about, going longer, getting this treatment, because it could have completely bankrupted my family. Now, imagine that situation, right? You have 2 sets of Black Americans, right, come together, get married, they're trying to build their wealth, first generation out of poverty, and just like that, someone gets sick, and then, had it been a longer fight, we could have completely been bankrupted, and having the fact that my mom has to sit there while she's dying, potentially going to leave her kids, her husband, her family. She has to sit there and think about money. She has to sit there and think about, do I want to keep fighting because I don't know if it's going to bankrupt my family and put us back, to basically where our parents were and have to try and start from scratch. Like, that is the society we are living in, and that it does not make me unique. That makes me actually very common, because there's 500,000 families every single fucking year in this country that go bankrupt, that work their whole goddamn life for something, and then just because someone got sick or one of their cells decided to attack their body, now they have to start from scratch. Oh, and by the way, your credit score's fucked. You can't buy a house. You can't do anything. That's the society we live in, and people just sit here and take it. And that's what makes me so frustrated. That's what makes me so frustrated, that you can still go out there and accept someone like Joe Biden, who's going to go to bat for these same people that are screwing you time and time again. And you're going to act like this is some fighter for you. You're not going to do every single thing. You're not going to withhold your vote for him until he concedes to fucking sign Medicare for all. If it gets through the Congress, we're just going to sit there and just vote for him. Like, this is the message we got to start bringing to Black Americans. Because like you said, Nick, they can't win without us. They cannot win without our vote. Lyndon B. Johnson, I believe, was the last Democratic president to win the white vote. It's not happening no more. So they need us. They need us. Yeah. And then until we actually start stepping up and be like, no, we're not going to just vote for you. Yeah, the Republicans might be marginally worse, but guess what? Our lives still suck. We are still getting screwed. We are still working as hard as we can and not getting anywhere. Guess what? We had a Black president. We had Bill Clinton. We've had 2 or 3 Democratic presidents. How are those? How is Compton looking? How is Southside Chicago looking? Huh? Because I think they still look pretty similar. In fact, they probably have gotten worse.
Yeah.
So we have to stop looking at these Democratic politicians who, just because they can come and be comfortable around black people, unlike Pete Buttigieg, that's the bar. That's the bar we're at. That's the bar we're at. If they can just be kind of comfortable around us, you know what I mean? Like, we have to get away from that shit. Like, and it's frustrating. Like, and I'll tell a quick story. You know, when Mike Bloomberg, stop and frisk Mike Bloomberg, was in the race, I started to probe my grandfather from Mississippi, moved to Chicago when, you know, he was a young adult, worked there, lived there his whole life. And he was actually like, you know, I don't think this Bloomberg guy is that bad. He's giving all these jobs to these black Americans, you know, giving money to all these black groups. And I'm like, that's all it takes. That's all it takes. That's all it takes, for real. Like, we got to get away from that shit. And, you know, I honestly am upset with myself because at that time, you know, this is my grandfather, you know, he's the patriarch of our family and all that shit. But I should have been like, nah, fuck that. You know, I should have spoke up and said something to him about that, because it's not acceptable anymore. And we're at a situation where we can't sit back and just not say nothing because, oh, they're our elders, or, oh, you know, we don't want to upset them, and we don't want to get on their bad side, et cetera, et cetera. Nah, it's too late for that. We all too grown for that. And this situation that we're in is too dire. It's too dire.
Right. I'll go hard on black boomers. Sorry, I'll give you in here very soon, CJ. I go hard on black boomers because I think the time to be nice is over. I tell you all the time, black boomers sold us out to the police state. They did it twice. They did it in the 90s, and they did it while voting for Joe Biden. And it's time for us to have a very, very hard conversation. But your story, this is why I wanted to ask you this, and this is why we started Hampton Leftists, because it's easy for people just to say there's a healthcare crisis. And this is why I framed the issue of Medicare for all the most pro-black policy, because we all have stories very, very similar to what Justin Jackson went through. And my grandfather, by the way, died 25 years younger than Henry Kissinger. How fucked up is that? You know why? You know why? My grandfather, who's a law-abiding, great family man, lived 25 years younger than, shorter than Henry Kissinger, because he never went to the doctor. That's a thing in the black community. So why do people not understand that Medicare for all is the most pro-black policy? Like, he died because he didn't detect his cancer fast enough because we can't afford to go to the doctor. That's the reality of what it means to be black in America. The reality of what it means to be black in America is your life expectancy is 5 years lower than white people. Why do you guys think that is? Healthcare plays a giant, there's a lot of myriad of reasons, but healthcare plays a giant role in that. A giant role. And like, you have, even when we have rich oligarchs die, it cracks me up. But even Sheldon Anderson, I mean, these people living way longer than people in our community, because what's the difference? They have great health care. That's it.
And they look dead for about the last 30 years of their life.
Yeah.
Like, Kissinger's looked dead for like 20 years. Like, how is he still alive?
Listen to this. Listen to this, guys. If what are the Democrats saying to the black community when they're denying single payer? When black people are the most, or would be the most, affected by single payer health care, because we would finally get health care. It is so common that black people don't go to the hospital, and you know, they want to, black people don't like, no, it's not that, it's money.
It's all money.
We don't have money, or we don't have health insurance. But think about that. Black people, 35% of the medical debt. Who's responsible for pushing the bankruptcy bill? Then we have hundreds of thousands of black bodies, black men in prison, away from their families. Who's contributing to this? Like, the Democratic Party sitting back watching us, our constituents, by their own words. They're watching their constituents be shot by the police, die at a higher rate of the pandemic, and do nothing. I don't understand how a black community don't see it. It's like, forget naming the street MLK. I would like health care.
Right, that part.
Amen.
Washington, D.C., I want $25 an hour health care. And I'm gonna pass it back to you after this. Grew up in Compton. I've seen a bunch of people die, get shot. If you offered every single gang member $30 an hour, gangs would go away. Gangs would die. It would go away if you provide them an avenue to make money, to have integrity because of the job and the work they're doing. Crime would go down. All of these things would be better, but these things make money. These things have a profit motive. Police brutality have a profit motive. Keeping the police exactly how they are has a profit motive. Keeping prisons the same way they are has a profit motive. So, with that said, trying to combat all these things by...
He'll be right back.
There he is.
Sorry about that. So trying to fix all the ills of America by using the same mechanism that got us here, which is voting. I'm not saying not to vote, but voting is what got us here. How did Joe Biden get in office? How did Nancy Pelosi get in office? What I'm saying is the corrupt people are running the corrupt system of voting. How do you think we're going to get any other results than the crap we've been getting? The corrupt people are running it. Like Noam Chomsky said when they asked Bernie Sanders when he was doing well in the primary, he was like, "Oh, he's not going to win. Oh, they're going to find a way to get that guy out." Ooh, he was like, "He's no way they're going to let that guy win. There's too much money involved for that guy to win." And I'll pass it back to you for anybody who wants to kind of piggyback off of that.
Yeah, I mean, the healthcare industry is 1/5 of the United States GDP every year. Just think about this. Like, if you live in a capitalist system, right, they'll spend $2-3 billion in advertising to ensure, they'll go, I bet you they'll go as far as directly paying people so that they don't vote for something like Medicare for all. Like, that's the situation that we find ourselves in, right? So that's why I think it really has to be a cultural evolution that we have here. To change this type of stuff, because I think given the lesser of two evils, like, people are still going to go out and vote for someone like Joe Biden, and having Joe Biden being the Democratic nominee after, having that hope like I had, that you had, Nick, and seeing someone like Bernie win Nevada, and all this shit, like, going from that to freaking Joe Biden, like, that just, it brings up that James Baldwin quote, right? It's that, to be black and conscious in America is to constantly be enraged, to be in a state of constant rage, because you have to see people cheering, voting for someone like Joe Biden, who really is the modern architect of mass incarceration. And then the bankruptcy bill, like, a lot of people my age are saddled with so much student debt. Thanks, Joe Biden. You ensured that student debt will be with people until they literally die. And even if they die, it'll pass on to their kids. Like Kamala Harris, California's top cop. Like, it really is enraging. And I know you guys feel the same way, but
yeah,
I feel like I'm definitely done ever supporting, the Democratic Party as it is. That's why I'm pushing for, third party voting, the movement for a People's Party. I've been a part of that. Any honestly third party candidate, just any way to get away from this corporate duopoly, I think is something that we have to really look towards, because it's tough to say it, but I think you really have to start looking like past one election cycle, and I know there's so much, at stake, or, I mean, really, there's really not that much at stake because both sides are so similar. But, you have to almost look past that one election cycle, because if you start picking off 10%, 7 to 10% of the Democrats' voting base, there's just nothing they could do. They either have to completely just never win another election, or they have to, you have to force them into some type of change. And Chris Hedges talked about this a little bit. This has happened not only before here in this country, but in a lot of other countries, insurgent third party candidates. Of course, they're going to make it extremely difficult. But like we've been talking about, this is a dire situation, and I'm going to use my platform to push for that. I know y'all are going to, and we have to get everyone to, kind of get on board with that. to just get away from this corporate duopoly and just, voting for these parties without any concessions when they're going to continue to screw you time after time.
You made such a good point about looking past the current election, because a lot of people had a lot of questions about my strategy, and I think my strategy was very, very clear. Because I was a strong supporter of the Green Party. I voted for them in 2016. I voted for them this time, and my rationale was very simple. Because I laid out earlier how I think the fact that Black people vote for the Democratic Party without asking for anything, that did so much damage to our community. So just imagine here a scenario where the Green Party hit 5 to 7%, and majority of that support come from Black people. Like the Green Party could be the new Black Party. Why did I say that? Because there were a lot of Black liberals like, oh, I want reparations. They will ask Bernie Sanders about they will never ask anyone else about it, but they asked about Bernie Sanders about reparations. You know who the only candidate that will support reparations on that ticket? The Green Party. The Green Party. There's a story how the military is actively polluting the Black community. So the military is the biggest obstacle towards fighting climate change because they're the largest polluter in human history. So the idea that you vote for Joe Biden, you're going to fight climate change, that's a joke. And that's why I was furious. I was like, we got to have a pro-Black party, because even if we have 5-7% of the Green Party, they get that amount of vote, and that's Black people. That means you have both the Democrat and the Republican. Trust me, the Republicans will love to win too. So they were like, all right, we got to have some sort of Black agenda so we can peel that vote away. So imagine if the Democratic Party loses by 3%. But meanwhile, there's a Green Party that got 7% and it's all Black people. They're like, okay, we got to have some pro-Black policies. That's the long game. That's how you play politics. That's why you can't just look at one election cycle. And now getting back to Joe Biden, pass it to CJ here very soon. Like, bro, the concept of voting for Joe Biden there's no way you can convince me. Like, zero chance. Because I just laid out the issues, like, with medical debt. To keep it too short, because I lay out how Joe Biden is the most anti-Black public official in the last 40 years. And I'm waiting for someone to prove me wrong, because the easy thing to point to is the crime bill. Everyone knows about the crime bill. That alone should make him one of the most anti-Black. But I don't even have to talk about that. We just talk about medical debt. You brought student loan debt. Black people hold 35% of the medical debt, despite us being 13% of the population. Joe Biden voted against an amendment that would ease the burdens of people with medical debt. So how is that not anti-Black? How is that not the most anti-Black public figure that we could possibly vote for? So the idea that Joe Biden, Jim Crow Joe, we're going to vote for him, who not only destroyed our communities through his criminal justice policies, but financially by taking the backs of credit card companies, he voted against an amendment that made it harder to people get money when they are victims of financial fraud. You know who victims of financial fraud the most? You know who got a check in the mail because I was a victim of financial fraud? Me, I did. Because I got charged a higher interest rate on my first car loan, and that was illegal because I was racially profiled. Joe Biden voted against an amendment that would have made it harder for me to get that. He was an active opponent of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They the one that sued, and they the one that got the money. He opposed that. So I'm looking at all these things, and I'm like, bro, you can't convince me that Donald Trump or anyone did more damage to the Black community than Joe Biden. But meanwhile, the white liberal, who is not a victim of any of these policies, it was super easy to them to be like, oh, you're a Russian. Yeah. You're a Russian. You hear all just laid out here, right? I will bring this up, and they just like, oh, you must be some sort of bad actor. This is why we have had a Black third party. But go ahead, CJ.
All right, so we have, unfortunately, it feels like the conversation is just taking off, but unfortunately,
I know
we have come to the end of this episode, and we do want to let Justin get out of here and get to his next engagement or what he has to do. But before we do that, I want to give both of you a chance. What are you working on? Shout out any of your solo projects, your own podcast. Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, so I have, recently, about a few months ago, I started my own YouTube show called The Takeover. Go check it out. I recently just did a really cool interview with Richard Wolff, who's a Marxist economics professor. So, yeah, pretty much just working on that, trying to get some great guests on. Like I said, Richard was a really, really big one I wanted to get on. I'd love to get on Cornel West. That's kind of my next big task to get him on. We'll see if we can make that happen. But yeah, I post, I will be probably posting a little bit less once football starts, just because my time is a lot less available. But definitely going to be posting, doing a lot more live streams and that type of content. Love talking with the chat and yeah, just communicating with y'all. And I've really enjoyed this. I definitely want to come back on. I'm definitely going to have y'all on the show. I want to talk maybe potentially, Nick, about that ICC report. I did see a little bit about it before I came on, but it's interesting you brought that up too. So definitely look forward to talking with y'all in the future.
Absolutely. What about you, Nick? What do you got coming up? Interviews? What do you got going on?
So a lot of people have been asking. So Dr. Cornel West is currently mourning his mother. Rest in peace, Irene West. I'm in conversation with him, and I will have a date with our interview as soon as possible. So I'll keep you guys. I'll let you guys know, and I'll put a good word in for you, Justin, to try to get him on your show as well. Because that's what we do. The only thing I can ask you to do to subscribe and hit the bell, because everyone know how independent media is being throttled. We can't rely on the algorithm to grow. The only way we grow is by word of mouth. So I literally just had to ask you, please hit the bell so you don't miss any videos and share, because we have a lot of great guests. Like Cornel West is just one of many. Like Justin Jackson brought up Richard Wolf, but I think Jackie from Hampton Leftists, she'd have a conversation with him as well. So these are the kind of conversations that we must have. So I'm not I guess I'm very negative, but the way we change things in this country is getting people to wake up by having these conversations. My goal is to get the Black community to understand that we can't just support politicians without asking for stuff. So that's what we doing here at the Hampton Leftists. This is why our conversation with Justin Jackson, me, and CJ here is very important. That's why you should check out his channel and support people of color, because the perspective you're hearing in this conversation is not the perspective you're going to hear from even a white ally. Like, I like a lot of these white people on YouTube who are way more popular than us, but they just can't give you the perspective that we have. So you can still support them, but not just Black people, not just Black leftists, but Hispanic leftists. Listen to Muslim leftists. Like, these are it's all about solidarity. Listen to the many people you can, and that's why I just humbly ask you guys to support, because we got a lot of good things we want to do here. So thank you guys for watching.
Absolutely. And thank you again for joining us for another episode of Straight Outta Politics. I have a lot of the same things. This interview was one of my bigger ones. And I got, Monica Black Bernie Babe. I got an interview with her coming up. One interview I do want to make sure we get, I know we're working on Cornel West, is Bree. I want to make sure we get Bree on.
I'll put in a good word
here, so if you can put in a good word for us.
Bree's amazing. She's amazing.
We would love to get Bree. I think she might be one of the few that we really, really want on, and we haven't had. It was you, Justin, Cornel West, and Bree were some of the top tier people we wanted. Nina Turner, I'm not sure how likely that is considering our politics, but Nina Turner is another one we would love to have on. Any last words before I sign off? All right.
No, I just appreciate it. Thank you.
Well said. The funny thing, I leave one funny tidbit. I'm still in shambles about this, because I was live with RJ, and Brianna Joy sent me a message. She wanted someone to talk about defund the police, but I was literally live, and she's like, I know this is last second, but can you jump on and talk about police abolition? I'm like, I'm live, god damn it. So she's on the radar. So it's gonna happen, guys. So I'm looking forward to that, and it was such a blast to talk to Justin Jackson here, and I'm very looking forward to coming on your show. And like I said, we talked about that ICC breakdown only for like 10 minutes on my show. I want to dive into this because I do believe that's an unbelievably significant development, because if you look at the report, it is extremely detailed, and we got to go through it because they list so many examples of how all the human rights violations our police are responsible for. But anyway, I'll send you guys on with that. We got a lot of great programs coming up. Support Fred Hampton on Patreon. Thank you guys.
Okay, you talk really fast, Nick. I don't know if I ever told you that. All right, thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Justin, and thank you, Nick, for joining me for this episode. Signing off for the Straight Out of